It took me a while to figure out that red had nothing to do with Mr.
The church did not have horses though.
I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Greenwood Common Council on Monday, November the 18th. If you would, stand with me, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. After the pledge, please remain standing. We'll be led in prayer this evening by Clint Whitson of Greenwood Christian Church. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray.
Lord God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to gather in this place to discuss issues that impact the well-being of our local community. Thank you for allowing us to gather without threat of harm or persecution. Thank you for the service of our local leaders, like those sitting in this room today. Father, I lift up to you the public servants of our city government. I ask you to bless them as they go about their work and listening and responding to the community as you have placed in their trust. I ask you to keep in their hearts the virtues of humility and servanthood. Allow them to stay focused on the overriding goals and principles of unity and vision, for we are much better off together than divided. And Father, I ask for your continued blessing on our community. We are extremely blessed to live in this time and place. Help us to never take for granted the many blessings that come our way every day. Father, we love you. It's in your holy name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you. You may be seated. Roll call.
Armstrong.
Here.
Bates.
Present.
Campbell.
Here.
Dine.
Here.
Foster.
Here.
Gibson. Here. Hill.
Here.
Hopper.
Here.
Lexi.
We do have a quorum. All of you should have received copies of the minutes of our last regular meeting of November the 6th. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Foster, second by Mr. Dine. Any discussion, additions, deletions, or corrections? Seeing none, roll call on the minutes.
Armstrong.
Aye.
Bates.
Aye.
Campbell.
Aye.
Dine.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gibson. Aye. Hill.
Aye.
Hopper.
Aye.
And Lexi's absent.
Minutes are approved and voted 8-0. Reports, Corporation Counsel.
Should have received a copy of the semi-monthly report to IDEM and also the litigation report on the SharePoint. If you have any questions, I can answer at a public meeting. Please feel free to ask them. If not, contact me.
All right, any questions? Anything from the Controller's Office at this time? All of you should have received sometime today a copy of my RDC report. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Any other committee or board reports? All right, this time, Mr. Mayor, I want to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. It's a special opportunity we have tonight to retire one of our police dogs who's been with our department for quite a while, so we prepared a proclamation for him. In honor of Canine Odin on November the 18th, 2019, whereas Canine Odin became a member of the Greenwood Police Department in November of 2013 and has served honorably alongside of his handler, Officer Brett Weaver, for 6 years. And whereas Canine Odin has responded over 3,556 calls for service as a Greenwood Police Canine. Whereas Canine Odin has played a vital role in the arrest of more than 150 narcotics offenders. And whereas Canine Odin has actively participated in 17 vehicle pursuits, he was not driving. Whereas Canine Odin has physically apprehended six suspects and they were actively resisting law enforcement. Whereas on January the 30th, 2016, Canine Odin conducted a narcotic search of a vehicle and yielded 21 grams of methamphetamine, a firearm. His actions resulted in the removal of dangerous drug dealer, narcotics, and firearms from our community. Whereas K-9 Odin will be happily living in retirement with his family, Officer Brett Weaver, Brittany Weaver, and Emma Weaver in their Trafalgar, Indiana home. Now therefore, I, Mark W. Myers, the Mayor of the City of Greenwood, Indiana, do hereby proclaim November the 18th, 2019, in honor of K-9 Odin. Congratulations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, is Dana Madsen or Christian Maslowski here? All right. At this time, we set aside an opportunity for members of the audience to address the council concerning items that are on the agenda. If you would like to do so, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. There is a 5-minute time limit.
Dale Margaret, 1153 Pilgrim Drive, Greenwood, Indiana. And of course, I would like to talk against the food sales tax that's being considered. The funds really should come from property taxes and should thus include the corporations. Most of the expenses that are increasing around here are direct results of all these corporations. We need to end some of these TIP funds, end a lot of these giveaway programs, and not tax the citizens for all these corporate expenses that are coming up. A 30-year TIF is not what the legislature had planned when they opened these things. The giveaway money for this hotel is supposed to be a luxury hotel or luxury apartments. Right now it looks like a pretty sorry, soul-sucking hole that has hardly been worth the city's funding and gifts. And so I would ask that the council members vote against this and look at the budget as something that everybody pays for and not just the citizens. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the audience or the council at this time? Seeing none, moving on. Ordinances and resolutions, second reading, Resolution 1928.
A resolution approving an interlocal agreement between the City of Greenwood and Park Pleasant Community School Corporation regarding construction and installation of roads to provide access to jointly used parking, sponsored by Gibson and Hopper.
Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Gibson, second. By Mr. Hopper. Any discussion? Resolution 1928. Seeing none, roll call. Resolution 1928, second reading.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Resolution 1928 passes second reading 8-0. Ordinance 1942.
An ordinance transferring funds within the Parks Fund for the Parks and Recreation Department from budget category 445, $7,322 to budget category 229, sponsored by Campbell.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Dine, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Foster. Any discussion? Ordinance 1942. Seeing none, roll call. Ordinance 1942, second reading.
Bates,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hill.
Aye.
And Hopper.
Aye.
Do I not get a vote?
Oh, I'm sorry, and Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Ordinance 1942 passes second reading 8-0. A new business, introduction of new ordinances and resolutions, Resolution 1929.
A resolution declaring certain area within the City of Greenwood an economic revitalization area and qualifying certain real property improvements and personal property for tax abatement and setting the time and place for a public hearing. Lions Head Precision Metals LLC doing business as IMC Company, LPM Real Estate LLC and or related entities, 1222 South Graham Road, sponsored by Campbell and Hopper.
Someone here that would like to address this?
Thank you very much, councilors. My name is Katie Culp, and I'm with Tax Sapper and Meller with KSM Location Advisors specifically. Now the best time of every presentation, which is when I attempt to make technology work. There we go. Truly, this is, if you knew how inept I was technically, the fact that even though it doesn't show the whole one, sorry. We'll just keep it in, even though it doesn't fully,
That's all right.
sorry, yeah, I jinxed myself. So at any rate, good evening. It's a pleasure to be back here before you tonight. I have the pleasure this evening of introducing Mr. Brian Smith, who's the president of Lions Head Precision Metals. We are here before you this evening. This is our first appearance, and we are requesting your support for a real and personal property tax abatement. And we'll get into the specifics of that, but I thought the first thing we would do would be for you to hear from Mr. Smith a little bit about the history of the company, which I know is always more compelling and interesting than anything I have to say. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Smith. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Good evening. So Lions Head Precision Metals is here tonight to talk a little bit about the company. We were established in 1963. So we've been around 56 years, currently reside on the southeast side of Indianapolis in Beech Grove. If you're familiar with that area, you might be able to see us from 465. We're landlocked there currently. In the last 3 years that Lions Head has owned IMC company, we've grown 20% and we've outgrown the space. And our current lease expires there in 2021 and we're looking for a new location. One of those locations happens to be Greenwood. That's why we're here tonight. We're a leading precision sheet metal fabricator in Indiana. We supply products to appliance industries, electronics, transportation, refrigeration, chilling operations, that type of thing. We have a broad, diverse capabilities. We do CNC machining, whether it's lasers, machining metal, CNC forming equipment. We do welding, press stamping operations, so we have a pretty diverse background. Our workforce average wage is about $20 an hour, and we're ISO 9000 certified. And we're currently looking at, if you're familiar with the Greenwood area along I-65 there, the area just south of Nestle and the Temple, that little triangle space there, almost directly across from Amazon. And the site plan to the right shows development starting on the south end of that property with parking and then the building. It's kind of hard to see on that pictorial there, but the corporate headquarter office space would be on the southwest corner. Which would be directly visible from the west and primarily driving south to north on I-65. This is probably a very good representation, 90% accurate. We're still looking at the architecture of the building, but this is predominantly what it would look like from the southwest viewpoint along I-65. And that's pretty much all I have. I'm going to turn it back over to Katie unless somebody has questions.
Thank you, Brian. We've been working with Brian and his firm for many, many months, might be close to a year now, as they explored a variety of locations in this region and outside of it, looking because they were they're out of space at their current location in Beech Grove. The typical factors came into play, workforce being a big part of it. So they have shown sustained growth over time, and Greenwood presents a really compelling option. So subject to our successful ability to navigate the planning and zoning process, which thus far has gone very well, And then also support for this economic incentive, which is critical in making the project economically feasible. We are hopeful that we will be able to proceed and move forward. So the nuts and bolts of the project, we're talking about roughly 117,000 square foot building. It's a metal fabrication and stamping plant, as Mr. Smith talked about. A little over $10 million, and then there's room for 2 potential staged expansions, which we have not included those numbers in terms of headcount or investment for today's presentation. Everything we're talking about is the first phase, but it is the hope that the company will continue to be really successful and be able to do that. A little over $5 million in equipment, and something that I know this group cares very much about, job creation. So it would involve the relocation of about 80 jobs from Beech Grove currently, and then there would be additional job growth that's anticipated to support the growing operation, so that we think a conservative estimate would be about 111 full-time positions in total by the end of 2023. As Mr. Smith mentioned, the combined average hourly wage is over $20 an hour. And I should note, I know this group pays a lot of attention to the timing and what the statement of benefits looks like. It references a completion date of 2023 because that's when the job creation goal we expect to be met by that point. But the capital investment itself, we think will be substantially completed by the end of 2020, so that in 2021, they would be moving in and moving equipment and would become fully operational early that year. The jobs that we're talking about, I've had the pleasure of being before this group before. I know jobs, the quality and the type are really important, and know that from Mayor Myers and his team as well. I would hope that you all would be pretty excited about the type of jobs we're talking about here. They're skilled positions in the trades and offer, I think, a unique element to your local economy that is perhaps hasn't fully developed yet. And so we're talking about CNC machine operators, laser operators, welding, some of these positions with a very robust benefits plan and really strong salaries. And again, this would be the corporate headquarters in addition to the being a production facility. One thing that I think is really important and speaks to the company's character and interest in partnering on workforce development issues is their involvement with the Central 9 Career Center. And you all, I think, are probably well aware of that organization. Not only did the former owner, was he in the first graduating class of this group, but currently roughly 34 employees for Lions Head have come from Central 9. And like employers everywhere, you know, it's difficult to find workers these days because the overall unemployment rate is so low, but they've been partnering with Central 9 to be a really good channel for students to graduate and find positions within Lions Head. So they're optimistic that that this trend will continue, and you'll note the last bullet there, 10% of current employees attended or currently attend the center. So that is, I think, a really successful example of not only the Central 9 Career Center, but also of Lions Head's interest in participating and partnering on these types of issues. I know this group is also always very interested in the financial impact, which is, of course, a big part of your decision, I know. I know this group is well aware, and probably most of the folks in the audience are, but for those watching along at home, I always feel it's really important to remind everyone that tax abatement, even though it sounds like a tax holiday, is actually a phase-in of tax liability over time. So right now, this site, of course, is bare ground, and it's generating land taxes. Should this project move forward, we're talking about a phase-in of the taxes that will be generated as a result of this building and the equipment that would be installed, and it's a graduated scale so that they'll continue to pay a greater share of full property taxes over the term of the abatement. Even with the abated taxes, if this group chooses to support our first request here and along with the process, we're still looking at over $1 million in real property taxes over the life of the abatement and about $650,000 in personal property taxes over the life of the abatement. And then once the abatement would burn off, we'd be looking at annual tax bills of about $230,000 on real property and almost $100,000 a year on personal property. And of course, again, we're just talking about this phase of the project. As the company successfully grows, we would expect there to be additional capital investment through additional phases of expansion. So for that, we are here today respectfully requesting your support for us to proceed down the abatement path. As you know, this is just the first hearing. We are, because of timing and a desire to hopefully successfully conclude this and begin construction, are looking to get a suspension of rules through the first reading. But just to kind of recap some of the benefits here, it's an established business. It's got a proven track record, one that poses less risk, I would think, than a company that perhaps doesn't have as long of a track record but so successful. There's been year-over-year growth for the past 56 years. They would be an employer of skilled trade laborers, which I think is a really neat opportunity for Greenwood and surrounding area residents with those skill sets. We believe it's the highest and best use for that parcel of ground and will complement some of the larger distribution facilities, but with being a corporate headquarters and having this skilled workforce there, it'll be a little bit unique and pose some differentiation to that part of the park. And then, Lions Head is very involved with the community's youth, as evidenced through the C9 partnership that I talked about. And then there's the property tax benefit. So with that, we would very much appreciate your support for the property tax statement request and the suspension of rules through the first reading. With that, I will conclude my comments and then see if you have any questions for me or for Mr. Smith, who can clarify anything. Appreciate your time very much.
Any questions? There's been a request for suspension of the rules. Do I have a motion on suspension?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bates, a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Gibson. Any discussion on suspension? Seeing none, roll call on suspension of the rules on resolution 1929 through first reading.
Campbell,
Aye.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
and Bates.
Aye.
Rules are suspended through first reading. Do I have a motion on first reading?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Foster, second by Ms. Gibson. Any discussion or questions for Mr. Smith or Ms. Culp?
I would like to say that it is nice to see jobs that are paying above the county average for skilled trades, and that there are commitments here instead of a speculative building, which we've been getting so many of over the course of the last few years.
All right, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call, resolution 1929, first reading.
Dine,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Gibson,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Hopper,
Aye.
Armstrong,
Aye.
Bates,
Aye.
and Campbell.
Aye. Resolution 1929 passes first reading 8-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinance 1943.
An ordinance adopting a 1% food and beverage tax sponsored by Campbell, Dine, Foster, Gibson, Hill, and Hopper.
Mr. Controller, welcome.
Evening. So as you're all aware, earlier this year, the state legislature did pass a bill that included language that gave the Greenwood Common Council the ability to adopt a 1%, up to a 1% food and beverage tax within the confines of the city. We were one of, I believe, 5 communities in that bill that got approval for that. Prior to that, the only way to get that tax was to get it passed by the state legislature, but it was not giving local authority. It either was or it was not. Based on this, we believe that we could generate approximately $1.3 million on this food and beverage tax. The state statute that passed was specific on what these funds could go towards. It called out parks, capital projects, and equipment, and economic development. So our intent with this would be to direct most of park spending from the food and beverage fund, which it does have to be kept in a separate fund from all the other funds. It can't be commingled with like the general fund or any of those. So we would move more expenses out of parks operating into food and beverage, which then would allow us to shift property taxes away from parks operating and back into the general fund. So that allows us to put more money towards the police department, but also allows us to shift some of the local income tax from the general fund and to the fire department. The reason we want to do it that way is that the fire department has an assessed value for its fund that is approximately $500 million less than the rest of the city. So if we increase the property tax going to that fund, we would not get a dollar for dollar return on that because of the circuit breaker tax credits. So by putting it to the general fund, we maintain our circuit breakers, and then moving the local income tax to fire still gets us more funds into the fire department. One of the other uses that we foresee is that the fire department is going to need within the next year or two to purchase a ladder truck and a fire engine. This could be used towards a lease purchase. We could dedicate funds from this money to do the lease purchase of that. Additionally, we do know that down the road, Station 95 is going to happen. We are going to have to put equipment in there as well. This could be used towards purchasing that equipment. One thing I would point out to the council is that based on the timeline set out, were the council to adopt this, it still takes 60 days from adoption for the city to realize any funds. And those funds cannot be spent without going through the additional appropriation process in front of the council. So you would still have that as well, because since we didn't know whether or not it would happen, we didn't have it in the budget for 2020, so we would have to use the additional appropriation process to spend any of those funds. This would be the same rate as Marion County restaurants. So right now, our tax on food and beverage is 1% lower than them. It would be the same. I would point out that we have a lot of people that come into the city limits to dine at the restaurants that we have here, particularly in the mall area, the 135 corridor. We're trying to draw more people downtown. And not all those people are residents of Greenwood. They're coming from other places. But while they're here, they are driving on the roads using police and fire if they need them, EMS if they need them, comes from our citizens' dollars. So bringing in this would help to fund some of that, not coming from the actual residents of Greenwood, but some of those people that are utilizing those services coming in. And then finally, the police department, the fire department, and parks are all what we would consider quality of life areas. And those quality of life improvements will generate a growth in assessed value for the city. That growth in assessed value then pushes down the property tax on our residents. We did get our 2020 preliminary budget just this morning. The tax rate is actually just below 66 cents, so we're 65.8, I believe it is. So the growth in the AV is controlling and actually pushing down that rate for the residents. And that helps us also with the circuit breakers. So this would help us offset some of that as well.
All right, any questions for Mr. Wright? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ordinance 1944.
An ordinance amending the 2020 salary ordinance, common council ordinance number 1928, to include landscape design maintenance coordinator position in the Park and Recreation Department and related changes, sponsored by Gibson.
Good evening. The adopted 2020 budget was inclusive of the landscape design and maintenance position not being funded. After further review of our inventory and what's to come in the 2020 season, reevaluated that, find it best to ask you guys to consider actually funding that position for 2020.
All right, any questions? All right, thank you very much. All right, other miscellaneous business. This is a second opportunity for members of the audience to address the council. Here tonight, would like to address the council concerning items that are not on the agenda. Please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. And there's a 5-minute time limit. All right, seeing none, council, miscellaneous business? Anything? Other miscellaneous business, corporation council,
We have none.
controller?
Nothing.
Mayor is not here. Mayor's son flew in from Italy, so he left to go meet him. We are adjourned. Thank you.